real, as though it has not been real for the past several decades in the land of Palestine and Gaza. But after the Hamas response, as of now, what are we? Are we 2 weeks away from that by now? Incredible. Time is just marching on. And what also intends to be marching on is the Israeli forces, which are reportedly amassing at the Gaza border, preparing for a ground invasion. The problem is, we're talking about the Palestinian people are already very weak and depleted because of the blockade, the lack of humanitarian aid that is allowed into Gaza. I've been following a number of not only Palestinian activists who are getting live reports from on the ground in Gaza, but Gaza reportedly only has about 4 days left worth of food. The water supplies are dwindling in Gaza's hospitals, which are already overrun, overflowing with casualties and people who have sustained injuries because of the Israeli bombardments. I read one report, and again, some of this I have to temper with, how can I verify this? You know what I'm saying? But I suppose it's just the sources that are posting it are ones that I find credible. So, another credible source on Palestine online talked about how medical staffs in these hospitals are now drinking IV liquids because the water supplies are next to nil. And so, on top of the Palestinian people not being able to leave, not permitted to evacuate, as the state of Israel has suggested they do. Remember, they dropped the leaflets over Palestine telling people, I guess, in the north of the country that they need to, try to be out through this Egyptian border crossing. But there has been a number of problems, snafus, intentional or otherwise, with that. So Palestinians are not able to exit. They cannot get away from the bombardments, right, from the Israeli military. And Israel claims to be strategically trying to pinpoint attacks directly on Hamas. Well, how the fuck you going to do that when Hamas are Palestinians? They right in there in the mix with all the folks, right? So you cannot single out Hamas for military strikes, for attacks, without damaging and outright murdering Palestinian civilians. And Israel is well aware that this is an impossible task. And I don't even know why they faking the funk publicly to the global stage as though this is some shit that they can achieve without maximum civilian casualties. But I digress. So as we come back to what is this looking like stateside? Well, it's looking fucking crazy stateside, as crazy as is going to look in America. I'm sure you guys heard over the weekend the horrific story of the 6-year-old Palestinian boy and his mother being attacked by their white landlord, who stabbed the 6-year-old child to death, gravely injuring the mother, though she is expected to survive. And all I heard all weekend is that America's on high alert. It's on high alert. I'm like, if anything, Muslims in America need to be on high alert, because when the shit kicks off and things are being framed as terrorism, it is Muslims that bear the brunt of that in this country every single time. And the reports of anti-Semitic attacks being up is something that I believe, but I don't believe that it's Muslims committing anti-Semitic attacks in America. Who has been the main perpetrator and driver of anti-Semitism in this country? Did y'all say the crackers? You would be right, okay? It's been white supremacists every single fucking time, with few exceptions, right? Anytime there's a synagogue shot up, it's not the Muslims shooting up the synagogue. Who is it? It's the crackers. It's the white supremacists. So if there are reports of upticks of anti-Semitism, y'all need the authorities, that is, need to be checking around them Proud Boys, need to be checking around them Oath Keepers, need to be checking around them 3%ers, because they are the main ones always driving anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks against Jewish people in this country. It is not Muslims, and it is damn sure not Palestinians. But there has been some lines of demarcation continue to be drawn. If you support Palestine and you support the right of Palestine to defend itself, well, are you supporting terrorism? Are you enabling terrorism? There's that narrative, right? And then there's the narrative coming from like the APAC wing of folks, right? that are understanding that more people in this country, I guess, suppose in the West, let's say in America, because everybody else seems to have a better grasp of the situation than people in this country. And that is intentional, by the way. For my international viewers, let me assure you, nothing is taught to American children for generations about the history of Palestine and how an Israeli state was formed. It's been reported about in the news for generations, but it's been reported to an audience of ignorance. People like myself who have very general, small understanding of the origins of this, why this continues to happen, etc. But like I told y'all, I became woke about Palestine maybe about 10, 15 years ago. And nigga, I don't have to recite the history. I recognize apartheid very plainly when I see it, and that shit needs to end, period, point blank. However, with that, people are having more questions, I think, about Zionism and the role that Zionism is playing in all of this, right? Because it's being framed in the news as a holy war between Jews and Muslims, and the Palestinians and Hamas don't want the Jewish people to even exist. They want to blow Jews off the face of the earth. I don't think that's true. And you notice well, I say propaganda, but it could be, but the propaganda I've seen on a lot of mainstream coverage about this talks about the Hamas charter, where, paraphrasing a lot of reporters here, where the Hamas charter basically says that, Jewish people need to be removed from the face of the earth. I'm like, how come nobody will read me the line? How come no one can run us that quote? What paragraph is it in? What sentence? What article? Again, it's just propaganda that continues to be repeated. It never gets challenged. It never gets questioned. And there's never a substantive answer for it. These things are reported to us, and we are supposed to accept them, digest them as fact without even questioning it. Okay, so let's get to Zionism. So the president of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Goldblatt, a character I don't really like this guy. I don't like this guy. Years ago, the ADL, I remember this. Maybe about 10 or so years ago, there had been some atrocities committed against the Palestinian people by the Israelis. And football player Reggie Bush at the time tweeted about supporting Palestine. And the ADL condemned him on Twitter. And I thought that was very strange. Regardless, the ADL is an organization I don't necessarily trust. I don't like their politics. And the fact that they are pro-Zionist, I think, is a major reason why I don't like their politics. But I want you guys to listen to Jonathan Goldblatt give an explanation. I believe this was on CNN, about the difference between, in his opinion, between being anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic. And I just want y'all to listen to what he has to say. So let's take a look at that.
Then, Jonathan, between being anti-Israel and being anti-Jewish?
Well, look, I think you can certainly be a critic of Israel. You can say, I don't like these policies.
Or are they being conflated, I guess, is really
the
question.
I think you can criticize Israel. I've criticized policy of the Israeli government. I'm not anti-Israel. But I think where we draw the line is being anti-Zionist. Okay. What I mean by that is this ideology that says, I oppose the existence of the Jewish state. I oppose the legitimacy of Jews having the right to self-determination. I oppose the whole notion that Jewish people should be able to live in their ancestral homeland. That is an ideology which is now common on college campuses. It's common in some corridors of power. We have people in Congress like Rashida Tlaib who professes this idea. And then, by the way, it's common in some newsrooms. We see this with the copy editors and some other people making decisions. But anti-Zionism, I've long said, is anti-Semitism. I was wrong. Anti-Zionism is genocide. And what I mean is, if you so dehumanize Zionists, by the way, every Jewish person is a Zionist. You might not believe in the political project of the state of Israel, but every Saturday morning, like for me yesterday, you open your prayer book and it talks about Zion. It talks about Jerusalem. Jews have been praying to Jerusalem for 2,000 years. 2,000 years. But here's the point. Zionism is whether you're a religious Jew going to synagogue every day, or you're just a cultural Jew who even thinks of themselves as an atheist. Zionism is embedded in our tradition. It's fundamental to our existence. And so for the anti-Zionist, who says all Zionists are evil, all Zionists are bad, the Zionist project is wrong, that leaves us in a very weird position.
It leaves us in a weird position because we are not defining things for what they are. Because number one, the conflation that Jonathan Greenblatt, yes, makes about all Jews being Zionists because they open up their religious texts and they go to synagogue. That sounds like devout, right? That sounds like somebody that's practicing their religion. Zionism is a political and national movement to recreate or to create a Jewish homeland in the Middle East and to sustain it, right? From the last show that we did here, where we heard from Orthodox Jewish people who were in the streets and supporting the Palestinian people, they reinforced to us, for especially to us non-Jews, right? Like, I've never read the Torah. I don't know what the Torah says, but I suppose would be more inclined to believe an Orthodox practicing Jewish person about what the Torah said than someone who's, this mainstream liberal like Jonathan Greenblatt, who again stands with Israel and what Israel is doing and has been doing to the Palestinian people. And for him to say that anti-Zionism is genocide is deeply inflammatory, and it is meant to target and to malign people that are in support of a Palestinian state, and for the Palestinian people to be able to live without being under occupation, without being under a blockade, for these people to have freedom of movement, and for them to enjoy basic human rights, right? Like, I don't think these are tough arguments to make. But I wanted to point out an action that was held here in Washington, D.C. over the weekend, very well attended. And it was put on by an organization of American Jewish folks called ifnotnow.org, right? And these are Jewish folks in this country who support the right to a free Palestine. And I don't know how well covered, if at all, this protest was in mainstream media circles. I'll come back and tell you how it was covered locally. But I want us to listen to a montage of clips. Now, the first clip actually is not from DC. It is a scene from Dearborn, Michigan. If you guys know the Detroit area, Detroit is home to a large Palestinian community. And they came out over the weekend in support of, obviously, the folks in the homeland who are suffering and facing a dire humanitarian crisis and who are under the threat of genocide, active threat of genocide right now. So that's the first clip. The first clip is from Dearborn, but the subsequent clips are actually going to be here from DC. And our friend of the show, Chuck Modiano, was on the scene per usual. Chuck got some amazing footage of I'm gonna call them the radical left Jews, because in America, if you stand in opposition of the state of Israel and you yourself are a Jewish person, I consider that left and radical to me. So I want us to amplify these folks that are out here using their voices. They are not letting their grief, and by, let's be clear here, and this is going to be made explicit in some of these videos, that some of these people that came out to protest at the White House themselves lost family and loved ones in the Hamas response from 2 Saturdays ago, right? But they said that they are not going to let their grief be an excuse to allow genocide to occur in their name. I mean, poignant words we are about to hear here from the folks that attended that rally. So anyway, let's take a look at these clips, everybody. It's a few minutes, but it's compelling. So I want y'all to pay attention. Let's check this out.
and that we will not allow genocide against Palestinians to be justified by Jewish grief. We have been here demanding that Joe Biden puts pressure on the Israeli government for ceasefire now! 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 Palestine! Free, free 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 Palestine! Not in our name! Not in our name! Not in our name! Not in our name! Not in our name!
I'm here because I want to assert that anti-Zionism is a family value in many Jewish communities, and that we have a responsibility to show up not just for oppressed people globally, but specifically for Palestinians and in our work of Tikkun Olam, which is healing. That's something that I've been taught will always include Palestine and the Palestinians and ensuring that they have a right to thrive in their homeland.
Your sign says you're a third generation anti-Zionist Jew. If I were to turn on my news channels, I would not think anti-Zionist Jews even exist. So what do people need to know?
What people need to know is that we've been out here, that my great uncle Irving Weinman drove in the Road to Hope convoy to Gaza in his 70s. May his memory be for a blessing. That there are so many elders who look around these protests that it's not just young people who are, quote unquote, as some Zionists say, too young to remember. We know, we've read the history, our families have taught us the history, and we assert that Palestine should be free.
For all the Palestinians living under apartheid! For all the Palestinians living under apartheid! Please! 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 We as Jews implore you! We as Jews implore you! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Our Judaism brought us here. Not only our core Jewish values, our core teachings of B'Tselem Elohim, that every single human being is made in the image of God. Not only that, also our history, the rhetoric that we see coming from the Israeli government right now is genocidal. Make no mistake, as Jews, we recognize it. And as Jews, we know that that means that through our grief, we have to speak up. We have to speak up because we know we're saying things like human animals. As you talk about bombing an entire people, we know where that leads.
Incredible scenes there from the White House over the weekend. Shout out to Chuck Modiano. Shout out to If Not Now. When, which is, hold on, let me get this right. Ifnotnow.org. It describes themselves as American Jews organizing for community to end the U.S. support for Israel's apartheid system and demand equality, justice, and a thriving future for all. So shout out to those good folks that came out, like I said, in very good numbers over the weekend. And the way that I saw this covered locally on News Channel 4, on NBC4, NBC Washington here, they mentioned that this rally was happening, but they didn't mention that it was a Jewish-led organization in support of a ceasefire and in support of a free Palestine. Like that was omitted completely from the local package that I saw. And that is intentional, everybody. There is a narrative that everybody needs to get in line with, okay? Like, and it is to get in line. The U.S., America as a state, as Joe Biden has repeated, stands unequivocally with the state of Israel. But that's to assume that everybody in America is rocking with that. And we know that, like us, people who are of our, political stripes, obviously do not stand with any apartheid state based in white supremacy and imperialism and colonization and all that shit. We ain't for none of that, right? But they want us to make sure that if you're not towing the line of 100% Israeli solidarity, you support terrorism, you're an anti-Semite, and you want the Jews wiped off the face of the planet, which I don't think any of those people that were out there on Saturday want any of those things. I don't want those things. You don't want those things. I want a free Palestine. Let's start there. Let me tell you what Netanyahu, well, yes, Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, has been tweeting up a storm. I don't have the tweet. Well, I just wanted to read this one thing. One of the tweets Netanyahu put out yesterday, the 16th, he said, "This is a struggle between the children of light and the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle." And this is the kind of dehumanizing rhetoric that some of the speakers from the clips that we just saw there were speaking about. Um, to say that Palestinians are the children of darkness and that they obey the law of the jungle is rhetoric that a lot of oppressed people are accustomed to, and has been used against oppressed people historically over generations to justify violence against them and to justify their extermination. Make no mistake about it, Israel intends to exterminate every single Palestinian that they're able to. They don't care about civilians, they don't care about children. They don't care, they don't care, they don't care. And I didn't include it today, but maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow on the morning show. One thing, and I think actually Jackie even mentioned it, Lucretia. Help me if I remember this right. But a lot of the stories about the so-called atrocities committed by Hamas are being debunked, having to be walked back. These false stories in Western media about children, Israeli children being beheaded by Hamas, about women being raped. There has not been any substantive evidence to prove that any of these attacks has happened as they have been reported. It is all about trying to gin up anti-Palestinian propaganda, again, to justify the massive use of force that has already been enacted against them, but will continue to be ratcheted up and made worse once this ground invasion is authorized. Oh, and by the way, y'all's boy, President Joe Biden, this is from Reuters, as of this hour, it says President Joe Biden will visit Israel on Wednesday to show support for its war on Hamas, while also pressing for ways to ease the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the trip's itinerary has been upended after a blast at a Gaza hospital killed hundreds. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe Biden. So you, who was vice president during the Obama administration, when the Obama administration inked a 10-year military support deal with Israel, $38 billion if memory serves. $3.8 billion to be paid from the United States to Israel with U.S. taxpayer dollars for a 10-year period to continue to show our support for Israel. Well, basically, that shows our support for a Palestinian genocide, right? And it seems as though Joe Biden wants to go to Israel on the precipice of the IDF ground invasion into Palestine to make sure that $3.8 billion in military aid is being put to good use. I mean, got to make sure them bombs is exploding at the schools and at the hospital like they supposed to, per America. That is some callous, cold shit for Biden to go and stand shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu while hospitals in Gaza are being bombed.